Okay, here's a question that sounds simple until you actually think about it. If a woman earns more money than her husband, more income, more financial independence, more options, who has more to lose by cheating? Most people, if they are being honest, would say the husband. He depends on her. She has leverage. So the obvious assumption is that the woman with more economic power also has more freedom, and more freedom should mean more options to stray. That is the story everyone expects, but it is completely wrong. The data says the opposite, and it is one of the most counterintuitive findings in the sociology of marriage. To understand where we are, you have to understand where this started. For most of Western history, a middle-class married woman had no income of her own, zero. Under a legal doctrine called coverture, enforced in England and America well into the 1800s, a wife's legal identity was absorbed into her husband's. She could not own property, sign contracts, or keep her wages. If she worked, the money belonged to him. If he died broke, she was broke. If he abandoned her, she had nothing. All right, picture that reality for a moment. You are a middle-class woman in 1845. Your husband is in debt. There is no welfare system, no fault divorce, and no shelter that will take you in with your children. You have no income, no legal standing, and no exit. What do you have? You have proximity to men who do have money. That is not romance. That is math. And the historical record shows women in that position sometimes made that calculation quietly, secretly, desperately. Gustave Flaubert captured this trap so precisely in 1857 that he was put on trial for it. Emma Bovary is a middle-class provincial wife with no income, no legal identity, and no exit from a marriage she finds suffocating. Her affairs are not really about passion. They're about money. She borrows cash from one lover, takes gifts from another, runs up debts she cannot repay, and when the whole structure collapses, when there is no more money and no more men willing to provide it, she poisons herself. The court charged Flaubert with immorality. What he had actually done was describe the economics of the trap more honestly than anyone wanted to hear. And then there was Caroline Norton. A real woman, English poet, middle-class wife, mother of three. Her husband, George Norton, accused her of adultery in 1836, falsely, and under coverture, he was entitled to her children, her earnings, her everything. She fought back. She lobbied Parliament, she published, she campaigned, and she eventually helped pass the Infant Custody Act of 1839 and laid groundwork for the Married Women's Property Act of 1882. Her memoir describes bartering jewelry received from admirers just to fund her children's care. That is the baseline. That is what total economic dependence actually looked like. Now, what happens when it starts to change? Yeah. That history is heavier than most people realize. The financial mechanics of marriage have been shaping behavior for centuries, and understanding those mechanics changes how you read everything that comes next. We have the modern data to measure this. But first, a word from today's sponsor. Want to run a YouTube channel without ever showing your face, picking up a camera, or learning how to edit? Topic to Video handles all of it. Type in your topic and you get back a finished video. Voiceover, visuals, captions, thumbnail, even shorts. Uploaded straight to your channel. No filming, no editing, no freelancers. Just topics in, videos out. Your first one's free at topictovideo.com. So, modern research has actually tried to measure this. Kristen Munch, a sociologist at the University of Connecticut, published a landmark study in 2015 using nationally representative U.S. data. She tracked the relationship between a person's share of household income and their annual probability of cheating on their spouse. The results were not subtle. For women, the curve is almost perfectly descending. Women who contribute nothing to household income, fully dependent wives, show roughly a 5% annual infidelity risk. That is not enormous, but it is meaningful. And as women's income share rises, that risk falls consistently, steadily, all the way down. Women who contribute 100% of household income, the sole earners, the ones supporting their husbands entirely, show near zero annual infidelity. That's crazy, right? The women with the most financial power, the most options, the most independence, they cheat the least of any group in the data set, not slightly less, near zero. The question is why? To understand the mechanism, you need to think about what it means to out-earn your husband in a culture that still quietly and persistently ties male identity to the paycheck. Even today, even in households where everyone would say they believe in equality. The idea of a man being financially supported by his wife carries social weight. It registers. It creates a kind of ambient pressure in the marriage. And breadwinner women, the research suggests, feel that pressure acutely and respond to it. Not consciously, not as a strategy, but as norm compliance. A female breadwinner who is already disrupting one of the deepest unspoken scripts in marriage that the husband provides faces a much higher social cost if she then layers infidelity on top of it. The stakes are asymmetric. The signaling imperative is intense, and so the affair option closes. She has too much to manage already. The marriage is already load-bearing in ways that most marriages are not. An affair is not freedom, it is exposure at the worst possible moment. And then there is the housework finding, which is where the paradox gets genuinely uncomfortable. Female breadwinners, the women contributing the most income to the household, are not coming home to a reduced domestic load. They are doing more housework than their equal earning peers, roughly 20 to 30% more. More income, more dishes, more financial power, more laundry. That's crazy. The pattern in the data is consistent. The more a woman out earns her husband, the more domestic labor she tends to absorb. Again, this does not appear to be calculated. It is not a bargain she is consciously striking. The evidence points to something more subtle, a kind of gender performance under pressure. She is managing his sense of masculine identity by making sure the home, the space most associated with his traditional role as provider and head of household, does not become a second arena where he feels displaced. She earns more at work. She compensates at home. The result is a woman who is, by almost any measure, doing the most of anyone in that household, and doing it partly to protect the emotional architecture of the marriage from the disruption her own success creates. All right, so step back and look at the full picture. About 40% of middle-class wives in the United States today are primary or co-primary earners. That is not a small group. That is tens of millions of women. And what the data tells us about that group is this. They are the most financially stable married women in the country. They are the most maritally faithful demographic in the study, and they are also the most overloaded. The old poverty trap, the world Emma Bovary and Caroline Norton lived in, where an affair was a desperate economic gamble against total dependence, that trap is largely gone. No fault divorce, property rights, earned income, the ability to exist financially outside a marriage. Those things changed the calculus. But the paradox persisted. The economics shifted and a new pressure filled the space the old one left. Economic power did not liberate these women from the pressure to perform loyalty. It intensified that pressure and just changed what the performance looks like. The woman with the most economic power in her marriage is also the one working hardest to make sure her husband never feels it. That is not a feminist conclusion or a conservative one. It is not a moral judgment. It is what the numbers say. And it points to something worth sitting with, that financial independence, as real and as important as it is, does not automatically dissolve the social architecture built around gender and marriage over centuries. It just creates a new set of pressures to navigate. The breadwinner woman is not free from expectations. She is managing two full sets of them. If this video changed how you think about the economics behind everyday decisions people make inside marriages, consider subscribing. There is a lot more where this came from.